Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 3rd of September, and for the first time in a long time this podcast is going out on the day it is recorded. Reason for that is we just got back from IFA over the weekend, so while things are fresh in the mind, we're going to have an IFA special on the podcast this week, so my only guest is Steve Withers, and we don't have a film line this week, Steve. So
no, not bothering with that.
No,
we're straight down to business today.
Exactly,
about.
very business-like. So competitions and so on, they'll all be in next week's podcast. We'll be back to normal next week, and we'll be doing our monthly roundups and stuff as well, because it's the beginning of a new month. But like I say, we were at IFA last week. It's my first IFA show in about 4 years. So it was a bit strange getting back into the swing of it, because it's a very unusual show in that it's open to the public. A lot of these trade shows that we go to, especially CES in the States, it's trade only. You have to either be a working journalist or you have to be in the trade, so either a dealer or a distributor or a manufacturer or whatever, to get into the show to qualify for entry. Whereas IFA's open to the public, so the Thursday is press day, which is usually nice and quiet. You can get around, you can do things. Come the Friday, it's a battle getting around because you're battling against the public. If you're doing what I'm doing and videoing, it's a nightmare. That's why there's no shots of me talking to camera, because it just wouldn't have worked. There's just so many people on the show floor and barging past and all the rest of it. So let's go to what we saw first. And the first thing that we went to was LG Stand, Steve, that we both went along and had a look at. Some concept stuff that disappeared when the public came to the show. So 88-inch OLED, 8K OLED. We had a sneak peek of this from LG Display back in January at CES, running the same demonstration footage that they were running at the IFA show, but it was the first public unveiling. Well, it didn't make it to the public unveiling because it was removed before the public came in, which was a bit strange.
Very strange. I'm not quite sure why they did that. Clearly, the Thursday, when they were showing on Thursday, that was aimed at, because that, as you said, is the press day. They also wanted to show the press, but for some reason they didn't want to show the public, and I cannot explain it, because it looked very impressive. I don't see why they wouldn't want to show it to the public, but it disappeared on the Friday, and just had a generic LG OLED display there.
77-inch C8 that they ended up displaying. So yes, that was a bit unusual. It did look okay, but talking to LG reps, not a lot was being said about it. They weren't committing to bringing it to market, and you get the funny feeling that it was there just because Samsung had an 8K, just because.
No, that was why it was there. In fact, there are only two things at their stand that weren't already products that are out. Was the 8K OLED that we saw on the Thursday, and also they were showing a micro LED wall of their own. Clearly, both of those were aimed at sort of combating PR from the Samsung side, because they didn't actually have it. I mean, this is usual for LG. They don't normally have anything new at IFA. It tends to be just a case of them showing either started developing or just reiterating their current lineup. Because they're usually pretty quick off the mark, aren't they? Unlike most manufacturers, they will probably announce their lineups at CES. They certainly did this year. Yeah. So they tend to be very quick off the blocks in terms of announcing things at the beginning of the year, getting stuff into the shops pretty quickly as well. So by IFA, they've done their entire lineup and they're already planning for next year. So I guess, they just have a couple of prototypes on display, which is what they had this year. They had the 8K OLED, which I did say I thought looked very impressive, and the micro LED wall, which again looked quite good. Yeah. Unfortunately, they were very thin on answers, were they? Like, how big are the modular panels? Can't say.
Yeah. So it was 4K resolution overall for the screen, but they wouldn't tell you how many modules there were and what the resolution was for those modules.
No.
Obviously, it was OLED technology. So in terms of seeing the join, I found it really difficult to see the join, but then again, it was set up in a way that you couldn't view it from side on, because it was the width of the room that it was in, so you couldn't get side on to have a look. And the material that was being shown, as always happens on a show floor, it was oversaturated, overpumped, overly colourful, quite glaringly awful, to be honest, footage that they were showing on their test footage. It would have been nicer to have seen something that was a little bit more realistic. But then when it's open to the public and they want the wow factor, that's what they tend to do. They turn everything up to 11. And unfortunately, that didn't work in favour of the display on that occasion. But like you say, LG products are all out there. We've actually got a B8 coming in for review this week, hopefully. and we've already reviewed the C8 65. I've got the 55 here on long-term test. And I've got to say, looking at all the competition that's come through so far, I've still to see the Philips TVs. It's a really strong product for TV of the year. It really is a strong front runner, the C8, for TV of the year, because it's a great all-rounder. So yeah, they didn't really, it was like somebody that pulls up to a race and doesn't have to prove anything, basically. That was the attitude that you were getting from LG anyway. And they deserve it, because they did everything at the beginning of the year. So
sorry, there was one announcement from LG that was of interest, is that there's going to be, for those who own LG TVs already, or are thinking of buying one, there's going to be a firmware update, I think next month, where they're adding Google Assistant built into the TV. So not what you can currently do, which is you could use Amazon Alexa to control it as a skill. You need where you actually need an Echo or a Dot in order to do that. They're going to actually have Google Assistant built into the TV, which is an interesting new feature.
Okay, interesting stuff. So like we say, they didn't really announce anything at the show. Neither did Panasonic in terms of AV and TV. AV, it was the Blu-ray player, the 4K Blu-ray player, the 9000. Yeah. We'd seen that already. So there wasn't any need for us to go and see that again. But we did pop over and have a chat with Craig Cunningham. If you want to see the results of that chat, and were there a few subtle hints in that interview? Mm-hmm. We'll let you decide on that one. But anyway, I think there's going to be some big news come CES. So there wasn't anything from Panasonic. We've also reviewed the FZ 952. You've had a look at the FZ 800, Steve. I've still to get my review sample in. It's probably going to be a few more weeks before I get to see it. But basically, it's the same TV, but with the soundbar.
Yeah, just without the soundbar. Really, really cracking picture on that telly.
Yeah. So nothing from LG, nothing from Panasonic. Moving over to Samsung. So Samsung have new model Q900. It's an 8K TV. There is no 8K content on the planet that anybody, consumer-wise, who can go out and buy this TV seemingly in the next month or so. It goes on sale.
Surprisingly, the 65-inch be about $5,000 as well, which is cheaper than I was expecting.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Are Samsung trying to do what LG did with OLED and get in there early and become the de facto screen for that resolution? That seems to be what they're aiming at. We had a closed door demonstration with them. We couldn't take photographs or anything like that, but we had demonstrations of the technology, the various technology that's in the TV. The interesting one is the machine learning side of things, the AI, which is their upscaling technology. Now, you have to have a USP if you're going to sell an 8K screen at the moment, because there is no content. So if you're going to go down that road and you're going to force it on the public as a standard, and it's what they're hoping for, the number of times that they kept saying, we really hope the 8K ecosystem will take off. It's something that Samsung really are backing. I think it will take off. I just don't think it'll take off this year or next year or even the year after that. I think this is a 5-year product cycle. I think we're right at the beginning of it. And the technology that they're showing is interesting, but it involves a lot of upscaling, especially when you're talking about lower resolution stuff. So that's even, I think DVD quality would suffer. I mean, they were showing us SD clips, and to be honest with you, yes, the processing cleaned it up, but it still didn't look very good.
You can only do so much.
Yeah, you can't add in what isn't there. It was interesting looking at 4K to 8K, because that's where there was less of an issue when it came to the upscaling, because you're going from a high resolution source and upscaling it. You can't add in what's not there, but they're using a lot of sharpening algorithms and so on, and this machine learning AI. So how that works is, it doesn't work in the TV that you'll own, but what Samsung do is they run footage over and over and over again, and they assess it with this learning technology, and every now and again they'll update their database with what they've learned from that. Now that's a really simplified version of what we were told, but I think it's the easiest way of understanding it. So every time that they come up with a better way of resolving a certain type of image on screen, they'll update their database, and then your TV then accesses that database in terms of a firmware update. So as soon as they find a better way of doing the upscaling, they'll then send it to their servers, and their servers will then download that as firmware, which seems like a sensible way to approach an issue like that, as long as they carry on and pull through with what they're saying that they're going to do there, because you only have to cast your mind back to the upgradable TVs from a few years ago, Steve, and that didn't last very long. It was a great idea to upgrade to the latest technology, but that didn't really stay around, did it? So you have to ask yourself, is this technology, is it viable, and is it going to be updated and keep being updated? Because it's going to be a long time before we get 8K content. We'll get the Olympics because NHK have said they're going to do it, and now that they've said they're going to do it, they have to do it, and they will move the technology along enough by that stage to do that. But if you look at motion pictures, which is the vast majority of content that pushes formats, is the movies. You know, as soon as movies become available on formats, that's where the big push is. It used to be, well, it only ever happened once in history that it wasn't the movie, the straight Hollywood movies that made a format a success, and I'm thinking about VHS there. But ever since then, it's always been the backing of major movie studios and having disc formats or whatever to push that content to your new resolution TVs. That's always the way it's worked. We're moving into a new world now where I don't think there'll be an 8K disc at all. I don't think that will ever happen, just because of the amount of data you're talking about and so on. To fit that on a disc, not possible. So it's going to have to be a streaming technology, and this is where this AI comes in and becomes useful. But then you're still talking about a lot of data. So you're talking about a lot of compression as well. And I don't know what your thoughts were on the demonstrations that we saw. I was impressed. I was impressed with the thought process. I was impressed with how well they'd thought out the technology and the problems that they're going to have. But I kept asking myself, and they were trying to answer the question all the way through, but I kept asking myself, why now? Why 8K now? 8K is great technology. It's in the future, it will be probably not the de facto standard, but it will become a standard, and eventually things will move on. But if you look at the film industry now, they're not producing even in 4K for the vast majority of consumer released material at the moment. They're still trying to ramp up for that. So when you're talking about 8K, you're definitely talking like a 5-year product cycle. So the thing I kept coming back to was, why now? I don't know about you, Steve, but that's what I kept thinking.
Well, I think the answer why now is just to have something to talk about, isn't it? Really, in the absence of micro LED, which I think is going to be the next big thing. This is a sort of a stopgap product to attract some attention, and as you say, its success will live or die on how effective the upscaling is, and how effective this AI technology is that they're going to be implementing, and also, like you say, how long they're going to keep doing it for, because I guess the limitation will be the processing power on the TV ultimately, as far as updates and upgrades go. I've got to say though, as a TV though, it was a nice package, wasn't it? Because I mean, there was not just the 8K aspect, but they were talking about being able to deliver 4,000 nits of peak brightness, 100% of DCI-P3. Obviously, there are things like all the game mode features, VRR, and that kind of thing. So I think as a product, it should be a very strong television as an all-over package. But the ultimate question is, I mean, as far as 8K goes, there is no content. There isn't going to be any content for a long time. And so that does raise the question of whether it's something you need. Now, obviously, it isn't. I mean, most people are still probably haven't even upgraded to 4K yet. So there's going to be, like you say, at least a 5-year cycle before 4K becomes saturated. And then we'll move into a cycle of manufacturers offering more 8K TVs as an alternative to having a 4K TV. But, I mean, it's interesting technology. I guess it shows they can do it and at a relatively affordable price. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, once one manufacturer goes, everyone else will pile in. It's only a matter of time. Yeah. I should imagine next year we'll see a lot of 8K TVs, particularly as we run into the Olympics in 2020. As you said, there will be some broadcasts in Japan, I think in China, and possibly South Korea. You will see 8K broadcasts, but that's not happening here or in Europe or the US. As you say, the only real way it's going to be able to be delivered is via streaming, and that means there's going to have to be some very, very efficient compression algorithms being used. Yeah. And I think that's a way off.
Yeah, you see, for me, that my concern here, and this is just my personal opinion, because I was impressed with the Samsung demo. They did a good job at explaining everything. They did a good job at showing us what they were actually talking about and explaining their thought process and so on. But for me, it just feels like there's too much processing going on to the image.
Doesn't that apply to every manufacturer at the moment, from what I can tell?
It does, but and we'll come back to it with Philips as well, with their technology. But for video purists like ourselves, who are always looking for, director's intent and all the rest of it, and pushing that point over, and the majority of manufacturers understanding that and doing that and providing that, we seem to now be taking a leap into the unknown again and using an awful lot of processing like detail recreation, quantum noise reduction, edge restoration, sharpening, jaggy free, more pixels, better pixel density, smoother sharpening. But the things that keep popping out here is detail recreation and talking about things that you can't add back into the image. Now, it did look impressive. I've got to say, what they were showing us looked impressive, but it was video footage. And it was footage that didn't have a creator's intent. It wasn't artistic, is what I'm trying to get at. Whereas motion pictures are artistic. They are a representation of somebody telling you a story, and they're done visually in a certain way. And my concern is how do these technologies marry in together? How do things progress going forward? Or are we going to get into that point now where, the vast majority of what we see is soap opera effect, is recreation of detail that doesn't exist and so on. I think we're starting to possibly move into an area that's a little bit dangerous if we can't create native content. And we start moving back to, depending on digital technologies and processing and all the rest of it to create an image. That's my one concern with it. And that's why I don't think it's the right time at the minute for 8K. What we see now from Samsung was impressive. I will give them that. It was an impressive demo.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, I got to say, for an LCD television, I thought it delivered a really impressive black levels. The local dimming, I mean, they're using the same number of zones as on the Q9, so that's I think 488. Yeah. But the way it's being applied, thanks to the additional pixels and the micro LED, well, sorry, that's not the right word, but the micro dimming that they were applying, I thought it worked very well. So that's good. And there was also a talk from somebody who works in the industry in terms of digital intermediates and workflows for HDR, and they were talking about HDR accuracy, color accuracy on the TVs, the wider color gamuts, the tone mapping, and it all looked like, if it all comes together, like I say, it could be a really, really good television. Certainly one of the best LCD TVs we're ever likely to see, and it might well be this is the sort of the last hurrah of LCD if we are moving into a world where we're going to have, OLED becoming more mainstream and micro LED taking over as far as the high end goes. So, it looked like a really impressive TV. I mean, obviously these are going to be pretty big screen sizes. I think there's a 65-inch, like I said, which should be about $5,000, but they're talking about 65, 75, and 85-inch TVs. So they really are aimed at the higher end of the market, and I suppose they're really a technological statement on that. That's what they basically are.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something to shout about. It's something to show people that Samsung are still here. They're still developing. Micro LED is still a little while away, but they are working on the next generation of stuff. And it was impressive. It was impressive. But I've given you my concerns on that one, so we'll see how things go.
I think what did impress me was the viewing angles were a lot better on that TV than I've seen on a VA panel in a long time. Yeah. That was something that did stand out. I thought, wow, you can stand off axis and it doesn't fall off like it normally does, like it goes off a cliff normally. That was one thing. I think the additional pixels and processing in there did help in that respect. But sorry.
But when it's side by side with other manufacturer stuff, I tend to ignore what I'm being told and what I've seen because because you went to the Sony. Unfortunately I didn't make it to the Sony TV demonstration because I had another appointment where I had to go and interview someone at that point. But you did go, so give us a quick brief update on the Master Series. I've got to say, when I looked at the TVs on the stand, they looked impressive. I quite like the back of the new OLED. I thought that looked really quite nice, even though it's still leaning back. I think the design,
it's a jazzed up version of the
design's quite nice. Yeah, so I like that, and I was quite impressed as well with the ZF off axis. Like you say, from
the ZF
axis,
axis
really
looked really good. And I was thinking, is this a VA panel or an IPS panel? Because it held up off axis very, very well. I mean, if it's a VA panel, God knows how they're achieving that, because it really was impressive. And it made me think, and they weren't answering the question, but it made me think, are they using an IPS panel in these TVs? Because it looked too good for a VA panel. Anyway, AF9, which has got design-wise looks very similar to the A1, but has a sort of slightly revised rear design, which I've got to say did look very attractive. Picture quality wise, very impressive. Again, a lot of picture processing going on. Again, like every other manufacturer, Sony, they've got their new, what was it, the X1 Ultimate processing chip. So there's a lot of manufacturers talking about trying to turn SDR into HDR, and I really don't agree with that at all. SDR is SDR, HDR is HDR. They're two very different things, and you can't turn one into the other. You can't add something that, as you said, Phil, that doesn't exist in the first place. All you can do is just, boost the brightness, manipulate the contrast, manipulate the gamma, oversaturate the colors. It's not necessarily something you want done, but that is something the manufacturers have been pushing in a big way. So in terms of the what do they call it? They call it, so it's the X1 Ultimate processor, which apparently has 50% more processing power than the previous processor, and now has object-based super resolution and object-based HDR remastering. Now, it's the HDR remastering bit that's basically trying to turn SDR into HDR, which is not something I personally
which is on this year's sets.
This is
on the IFA. They've jazzed it up a bit.
Yeah. They jazzed it up a bit. They've done one thing, I think, which is about time. They've got rid of a lot of the picture modes that no one ever used. So they've simplified the number of picture modes. So now, as far as picture modes go, you've got, I think it's Cinema, Custom. Custom is going to be what was Cinema Pro, and Cinema is now what was Cinema Home. But on the Sony TV, Cinema Pro, or is going to be now Custom, is the only one that doesn't have any manipulation going on behind the scenes, because the Cinema Home mode did. They've also got a pixel contrast booster in the AF9, which comes in 55 and 65 inch screen sizes, by the way. And they've got talking about the redesigned rear. They've got 3 actuators at the back and 2 subs built in. And something that did demonstrate, which I think is a cracking idea, is the center speaker mode, where you can use the acoustic surface of the TV as a center speaker in a multi-channel setup. And that one they did demonstrate, and it worked really well. And I've got to say that is a very clever idea, and I think that could be a big selling point for anyone who's using an AVR system, and rather than having a center speaker, just use the acoustic surface on the TV as a center speaker. Obviously, that means that the sound is coming directly from the screen. I've
got to say, on the IFA, I think that I have here on long-term tests, it's one of my favourite features on the TV is the acoustic surface. It really is a really good idea, and it works really well. And like you say, I mean, it just adds a little bit of realism to where the sound's actually coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the things on the AF9. Other things to mention, I guess, are that there's a new Cowman auto calibration software. They've got proper calibration controls now, so about time.
Portrait display really have wrapped up most of the major manufacturers now when it comes to that. So
done. Also, there's I don't know how this is going to work, but there is a Netflix calibrated mode. Be interesting to see what exactly that means.
Now, I was on the stand. It was only mentioned in a little demo that they were running. There was nothing else on the stand showing anything. Did they go into it in the presentation?
No,
anyway?
It just mentioned it. It's like, the TV, right. The mode was. I'm thinking, well, surely Netflix uses the same standards as everybody else. So
yeah. See, this is the thing that worries me about this. Nobody's willing to speak about it. So nobody's going into any details about it. And what it actually does and what it actually is.
It's going to be hard to test as well, because you're going to need to be a Netflix content, presumably, to select the Netflix mode. So I'm not sure how we'd even be able to measure it.
Yeah. So I'm always dubious of things like this, and I'm not having a go at Sony, but if you're going to release something like that as a marketing gimmick, which is what it looks like, give us a bit more detail. Tell us what it actually is and what it actually does. Otherwise, it does just look like a gimmick.
Yeah. Terms of operating system, so still Android, of course, Android Oreo, built in, which is going to have built-in Google Assistant and a built-in microphone as well, actually. And I asked about, it will have Dolby Vision support out of the box. It is the same profile that they've been using on their other TVs. It's not the more generally used profile. So it is still the Sony specific profile that they're using even on the new TVs. In terms of the ZF9, I mean, all the same features basically that the AF9's got, but this is obviously an LCD LED TV that now includes the X Motion Clarity that you reviewed on the XF9T.
Yep.
Yeah. Which looks really good. I've got to say that feature looks really good. It's got the Extended Dynamic Range Pro, so local dimming. They wouldn't say how many zones, they wouldn't say how bright it goes, but we'll be able to find that out in testing. And then also the X Wide Angle aspect, which is what I was talking about at the beginning, where it's got a really wide viewing angle that makes you wonder whether they're using an IPS or a VA panel. I think that's about it as far as.
I've got to say that was one thing I did notice on the ZF9 was the haloing behind an object. It's in the video if you want to go and have a look at the video of the IFA coverage. It's where the hand goes in with a paintbrush to take some paint out of the little cup. There was quite a bit of halo in there. Like I say, I shot this bit of video. I was watching the screen at the time, and I could notice.
Oh, sorry, you mean actually on the stand?
On the actual stand.
Oh, right, yeah.
So,
okay, interesting.
So I saw quite a bit of halo in there. So it's impossible to count how many zones it is from a bit of video, but it looked like there was larger areas, if you know what I mean. So it didn't look as fine. So I'm wondering if it has as many zones as the old model. That's kind of what popped in my head. But we won't know till we get them in for review. And it's nice and easy to check that once we do get them in. We'll be able to do our usual count and see how many we think there is in there. But I'm just wondering if that's the panel design has changed, because you were on about viewing angles, and that was one thing I did notice. But I also noticed quite a bit more halo around some objects. So I'm just thinking maybe they have changed the panel.
Yes, I guess time will tell. But I think it's good to see that they are at least finally listening to feedback and making changes. For example, all the HDMI inputs are going to be fully spec'd at last, rather than just having 2 out of the 4, which I think was very mean on flagship TVs. So that's
but I just want to point out that it wasn't just Sony.
There's other manufacturers.
Other manufacturers do that. So yeah, but it's nice to see they have moved on to that, and they're doing the same with the projectors as well, which is great because you only get 2 inputs on the projectors.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that they're now full bandwidth.
They look good though. They did look good. They're impressive in the demos, but I've got to say the demos were really heavily rigged. There was some stuff going on there. I thought there's no way that TV looks like that normally, because I've reviewed it. There was 2 TVs, both of which I've previously reviewed, and I knew for a fact that they were better performance than that, and I think some rigging going on. But that's pretty much par for the course in these demos.
It's like I said before. Whenever it comes to against the competitor, look the other way, because it's usually rigged in their favour. And I don't know why manufacturers do that, because it's just tell us about your product. Just show us the strengths of your product, and leave the comparison stuff to other people. And at the end of the day, sometimes you're talking about 2 completely different technology cases. So if you've got an LED LCD TV, why are you putting it up against an OLED? Because they're completely different technologies and they're made for different markets.
In fairness, they were doing ZF9 against against the Q9, and they did the AF9 against the E8.
Yeah.
I knew that both those TVs could do better than they were giving them credit for. Yeah. So but you always take it with a pinch of salt. Yeah. Still, looking forward to them. I mean, and the pricing actually wasn't. I did catch. I think I caught the pricing. Did you catch the pricing? Someone was talking about it. I wasn't sure whether.
Yes, we do have the pricing. If you give me 2 seconds, I'll just bring it up on screen because I didn't have that page open. Yes, so 75 ZF9 is 4999. 65 inch is 3799. The 65-inch AF9 is £4,000, £1 under £4,000, and the 55-inch AF9 is £1 under £3,000, so 2,999, which are pretty good prices for new models coming in. Be interesting, like I say, be interesting when they come in for review. We get to see them and we get to play about with them a little bit more, and we get to live in them for a week or 2, and put them through the paces. And it'll be interesting to see this new processor with the Android platform, because it's been the Achilles heel for Sony for a while now, is the Android system and it crashing and it being quite slow and all the rest of it. So it'd be nice to see if the processing power has been adapted, let's say, so that's not an issue anymore. Because if they manage to sort that out, then it becomes a really good all-rounder then. Especially the OLED. Because the F8, picture-wise, it's great. It's just the Android side of things really kind of lets it down a little bit. So that's Sony. So let's move on. Let's go to Philips, because we're talking about picture processing. This is the big thing for Philips. It always has been. They've always been at the forefront of picture processing power and having powerful processing chips in their TVs. This year, no exception to that. They have a new generation of the P5, and I keep getting the name wrong, Steve. It's one of these names that I'm always going to get wrong when it comes to this. It's something reality, something natural reality, that they're calling it.
Perfect natural reality? Perfect natural reality.
Yes, I think it's something like that. I always get
I've got it written down on my notes. Perfect natural reality.
I always get the wrong way around or whatever. But yes, so Dan Utak has always been the picture processing guru, really, the picture guru. He's always been pushing the better motion, better pixels, smarter pixels, all that kind of thing. And I'm going to admit it here that now and again I have banged heads with Danny in the past, because our philosophies are a little bit different. Even in the shootout that happened last year, we had disagreements on, was the sharpening on, was the sharpening too much, and so on. So the one thing I do like to do, though, is give people the opportunity to explain this stuff before I form any opinion on what I think. And I always show them the utmost respect in their field and what they do. And Danny is an expert when it comes to what he does, which is picture processing. I'm never going to knock him, even if I disagree with some of the techniques that they use, because I have more of a purist feel for an image than perhaps Danny does. Because you've got to remember that Danny's an engineer. He doesn't create these images, in terms of he's not the artistic side of things. So when it comes to motion pictures and so on, I think we have the same attitude. I think we have the same, yes, put it in movie mode and so on. But Danny does go off and do things that you think, well, I wouldn't have thought of doing that, but actually, now that you're showing me this, I can see the thinking. And that is definitely about this natural reality processing. It's again changing SDR into HDR. So I think we have to, I mean, you've already touched on it, Steve. We have to cross this bridge. In my view, SDR, leave it alone. So very much what you said. A lot of thought has gone into the creation of that material. It hasn't been graded as HDR. It's been graded at 100, 120 nits to be shown in SDR. You're not going to retrieve any other detail from it, especially motion pictures, by boosting the contrast and changing the gamma curve, which is basically what's happening here. There's some clever algorithms going on. There's some clever, which I asked the question and Danny point blank would not answer it, because obviously you're talking about proprietary techniques and so on, which he didn't want to go into, which is understandable. He didn't want to make that public. But for me, again, it's changing something. It's trying to add something that isn't there. It is this trend that is going on at the minute, and I don't really understand why you would want to do that, especially when we've seen things like the BBC over the summer do really successful HLG demonstrations, which is hopefully now going to pave the way to next year having an actual service via the iPlayer that is in 4K and is in UHD with HLG. So you're going to get it from the broadcast side. We already have it on discs. If it's been given an HDR grade, you can go out and you can get this content. Now, their argument is that not everybody has that content in their living rooms, but they want the technology. But changing SDR EastEnders in SDR into EastEnders HDR, I don't get it. I genuinely don't get why you would want to do that. Yes, it's very, very clever technology. It's very clever algorithm. The demo footage that they were showing, which was clouds, which is in our IFA video if you want to have a look at that. Obviously, it's shot on a camera, so don't make any final representations, but it gives you an idea of what the technology is doing. So, yes, the clouds were brighter and there was more detail, or perceived detail, I should say, just because it's manipulating the gamma curve. There's not any actual detail in there, extra detail in there. So yeah, so that's what it's doing. It's got a fancy gamma curve. They're manipulating the contrast. They're brightening certain sections. There's a histogram, which is obviously looking at the image and deciding what the highlights are and boosting those, and where your blacks and greys are, and manipulating those through use of gamma. And with the demo sequences that he was showing there, it did look impressive. It did everything that he said it was going to do, and it's very, very clever.
Until...
Well, go on.
Until they put on a film sequence.
Yeah.
The demos with like clouds and mountains and sort of stuff they shot for the demos, they looked, you thought, oh, that I can see more detail. That was quite impressive. Mm-hmm. Then they stuck on a scene from Life of Pi and it looked bloody awful.
It did. It just didn't look good at all.
Over too much sharpness being applied, too much processing. It just looked it did not look like. I've seen Life of Pi both in SDR and HDR. As in the HDR 4K disc. So I know what it's supposed to look like, and it just, it wasn't a natural representation of, as you said, it was not a representation of the artist's intent.
Yeah.
At all. It was Danny's representation of his intent.
Yes.
I guess.
Yes, and don't get me wrong, we're not having a go. We're not putting Danny down in any way, because he is a very, very clever man, and what he does with the processing and so on, it is very good, and a lot of the processing that they do, the noise reduction stuff and so on. If
Upscaling, everything is really good.
Yeah, if you're watching SD content and so on, they have some of the best noise reduction, some of the best upscaling technologies out there, because he really does know what he's doing.
And motion handling too. If it's things like sporting events, that sort of stuff, the motion and upscaling, frame interpolation can be very effective.
Yeah, it's just that as we say, we always go for what was the intent of the artist behind the content, and we want to try and replicate that, because that's why standards exist. And that's why we want manufacturers to respect the standards and have at least one mode within the TVs that respects that and shows it as close as possible. I just couldn't get my head around why you would use it. It's very, very clever technology, but when it comes to films, I couldn't understand why you would want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, would not be my personal choice. That would apply to any manufacturer who is applying processing to, like I said, the current Sonys. If you use the cinema home mode, there's processing being applied behind the scenes that you cannot turn off. It manipulates the gamma. So the only mode I would use would be Cinema Pro, because that's the mode where you can replicate the artistic intent of the content creators, and they spend weeks, sometimes even months, color timing, doing digital intermediates, and making a very, very specific image that's meant to tell the story visually. And if you're changing that, then you're not getting that effect any longer. So, I mean, obviously, there were marketing aspects to this. You can, having processing features and SDR to HDR makes a marketing, feature that you can present to consumers. And some people are less fussed about image accuracy and fidelity, and therefore they'll be more than happy to give it a try. As a purist, it's not my cup of tea, but I understand why it's there.
Yeah, and it's very clever. It really is.
It is really clever.
What they can do, it really is clever.
In real time, the processing they're doing is staggering.
It is. It's really, really good. And I've got to say, I really liked what I've seen of the 803 and the 903 OLEDs.
They look great.
They look really, really good.
The B&W soundbar that they built for the 903, which was limited in the sense that they already had some of it already designed and built, so B&W had to sort of like fit things into the available space. Next year they'll be doing it from scratch. But I've got to say, one of the best sounding TVs I've heard in a very long time. Yeah,
I was off axis. I was the other side of the room from where you had a good
dead center.
Yeah, so you had a good angle. I was a little bit further off to the left hand side, but even then, there was a definite difference in the sound quality. So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to getting both of those through for review. Hopefully 903 first of all, and then 803 after that. And picture quality wise, I've had it confirmed with Danny. It's on the video as well. Identical. So the same panels, same processing, same image quality. The only difference is this soundbar, but it looks like a really worthwhile upgrade if you want to have a nice sounding TV and you're not going to have an external standalone system. It could be one to look at. So we'll be reviewing those when they come in. So let's change the tack a little bit from TVs to projectors. I know Steve's dying to talk about JVC, so we're going to go and talk about Sony first. Right, so I saw these Sony projectors back on I think it was the 9th of August. It was way back at the beginning of August anyway. I went down to Watford. There was three journalists there. So we all got our own little sessions with the projectors, so hands-on, have a look at them, find out what we thought, shoot little video bits that we could publish when IFA came around. The only one I got to spend any time with looking at content was the laser projector, was a £25,000 laser projector. And I've got to say, it was impressive, really impressive image quality. Sony have been doing native 4K for a long time. They know what they're doing there. It comes from the professional side of their business, so they have been producing cinema projectors in 4K for a long time. So in terms of economies of scale and so on, they have been able to bring it to market a lot quicker than JVC have, for example, because they have the means to do that. And they've been doing it for a number of years. I've been impressed with most of the Sony projectors I've seen in. The last one I saw at here was the 760, which I thought at the £14,000 price point was impressive. It gave a really nice image. So it's nice to see that they're keeping that projector. They're moving the 870 up to the 25 grand mark. They're getting rid of the 550, which I thought was a great projector as well. That's disappearing, as is the 360, and they're being replaced by the 570.
And the 260 as well.
Yeah. The 260 goes, and it's been replaced by the 270. So the 270 is the entry level. All the details are in our video, which is on the homepage if you want to get all the details, and the interview from Chris Mullins, who has moved from the Sony professional side into the home cinema side. So he absolutely knows what he's talking about when it comes to projector technology in the home and professional use, and what the crossovers are there in terms of processing and using the chipsets and all the rest of it. So it's an interesting video. Go watch that. So yeah, I'm impressed, but I was expecting the prices to be a bit lower this time around, because, like I say, they've had the economies of scale for a number of years now, Steve. They've been working in this field for a number of years, and I was expecting the entry point to finally be under £5,000. I think if once that barrier is broken, it opens up the market.
270 is £5,000, isn't it? Or 5,000 euros, they were saying.
It's going to be it's going to be about £5,000, but then it goes to the distributor in the UK, and it depends whether they put it out at £5,000 or not. So that's because we were told £5,000 last year, but then when the distributor added on the cost of them distributing it, I think it bumped it up by a couple of £100 over that. I think it's a psychological barrier, this £5,000 mark, for a lot of AVForums members anyway. I think once we get native 4K under that, it opens up a whole new market for the likes of Sony and JVC. But I think the technology, certainly from JVC's side, is brand new. So they've just brought this technology into market. I'm surprised it's at the price points it's at. I was expecting it to be more expensive than it's coming at, because it is their first, and they don't have the economies of scale that Sony have. So I think even though the JVCs have come in at the price points that they have come in at, I'm impressed that they've been able to bring them in and compete with Sony, because that was when we saw the units on the stand and so on, I'm thinking, I hope they get the pricing right. I really do, because otherwise, if they were too expensive, it hands the market to Sony basically. And it's nice to have a bit of competition, one playing off against the other. The consumer wins at the end of the day. And these products have to exist. They have to exist now, and they have to be at the prices they're at now. So the economies of scale change, and the prices come down, and the prices start to erode. Once you break that £5,000 barrier, then it opens up a whole new market. We're just not there this year.
I appreciate there's probably other factors associated with this too. Brexit, basically. I think that's.
Yeah.
I think there would have been. I think a lot of products would have been a lot cheaper over the last couple of years, but exchange rate issues have pushed up price. I mean, because all these products are built outside the UK. So once the pound gets thumped, unfortunately, the side effect is that all these things that we love to buy, they get imported, go up in price. And unfortunately, I think that's going to get any better for the next couple of years. And we are going to see, I think pricing would have been below £5,000 had it not been for Brexit.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. But they look good. They should be coming to market, I think, around about the same time as JVC. So
they're going to come mid-October. Yeah.
So JVC is October as well. So they're all going to come to market around about the same time. And it's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to using my cinema room at the end of the year, because hopefully we'll have one or two in at the same time and be able to put them side by side and so on, and see what the differences are and see where the technology is. But quickly we'll move on to JVC. So their models, they start at £6,500 or around about £6,500, £8,500 and £18,500. So you've got the two N models, the N7, the N5 and the N7. I think the N7 is going to be the sweet spot, because the N5 is the entry level. I mean, it sounds silly saying entry level at £6,500, but that's what we're talking about when you're talking about this technology. That is the entry level for that technology. The cutest thing is it only has Rec 709 color space. It didn't say anything about DCI P3.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, though, is it restricted to 709, or is it that it just can't do DCI P3?
I think what they meant is it can't reach 100% of DCI P3.
That's what I thought as well. So,
and as long as it maps correctly to its actual native color space, that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Contrast performance, I think it's 40,000 to 1 they're talking about in terms of, and about 1,800 lumens peak brightness.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially, it looks very much like a native 4K version of what would have been previously the X5 900, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
With a very big chassis, I have to say. It's
a big chassis, but it's not massive. So it's around a bit. It's just a little bit bigger than the X series that we're getting rid of.
Yeah.
Although the X7900 is allegedly staying around.
Yes, it is.
And it's going to have a price reduction, which is good because it's a cracking machine. So it's a little bit longer, a little bit wider, but it's definitely a lot taller.
And it's 20 kilos, which is pretty heavy. Although the 7900 is, I think, 16 kilos, so it's only 4 kilos more. It's not a massive difference.
And that will be down to the glass lens, which I was really impressed. So it's
all
going to
glass
have
lenses.
All
on
glass
these.
lenses.
Now, please remember that the Sonys, well, not the 870s all glass, but otherwise they all use plastic lenses, not completely all glass. So
yeah,
JVC are using all glass lenses from across their entire range. I think they always have.
Yeah.
Haven't
they? So the N5 and the N9 are 65mm high resolution all glass lenses, and they're both ISFC3 certified. But then when you jump up to the £18,500 model, which is the NX9B,
that's right.
It has a 100mm high resolution all glass lens, and it does 2,200 lumens, 100,000 to 1 native contrast. Now JVC are really conservative when it comes to their contrast, and I've got to say, during the demo I was absolutely blown away. Really good, really good. But then it should be for nearly 19 grand. It'll be interesting to see how the N5 and the N7 hold up, because we didn't get to see them, although you have gone and ordered one.
Yes. Well, like you're saying, the N7 and the NX9B, there's a difference in the lenses, and obviously the NX9B has this 8K shift, and it's also THX certified, which unusually the N7 isn't, because the 7900 and 7000 series, should we say, that was previously. But otherwise, I think you're getting exactly all the same features. So it looks like as you said, this could be a sweet spot for anyone looking for a native 4K projector, because comparing it to specs-wise, comparing it to the Sony, the 570, and I think spec-wise, the N7 is superior. It's got the JVC blacks, it's got an all-glass lens, it's got a wider color gamut, I'm pretty sure, and I just think overall it has a nicer feature set, and it would be my preferred choice.
The thing I'm really interested in testing, and I'm so glad that JVC have taken the time to look at it and to look at basically where the issues are with projectors. Now, projectors are not built for HDR. It's a reflective technology. It's never going to be as good as a TV, but they should be able to give us a bit more dynamic range in the image, and it should be able to add a little bit more to what you're watching over your normal HD, normal 4K. And projectors have struggled, because getting the tone mapping right when you've only got 200 or 300 nits to play with in terms of actual brightness, tone mapping becomes very, very difficult. And it's always been Sony have always done it better, basically, than JVC up till now. Even though the X7900 did get very, very good with what it was capable of doing. And again, let's point out here that projectors struggle with HDR. So don't expect HDR images to ever look absolutely perfect on a projector. It's never going to happen. There's no standards for projection. Any standards, even HDR10 standards. There's nothing there that really says what projection should be, other than commercial projectors. So it's one of these things that projector manufacturers have struggled with, are going to continue to struggle with, but I think JVC are onto a winner with what they've decided to do there, and that's basically look at the metadata and set the projector up for that metadata for that film.
Yeah.
Now, it's not dynamic metadata.
No.
Let's point that out straight away. It's what they call auto tone mapping.
Yeah.
This is not the same as dynamic metadata, so do not get confused with that, because I've seen some comments on the forums where people have confused the two, and it's easy to make that leap, because it is quite confusing. What it's doing is it's looking at the maximum brightness and the minimum brightness in the metadata that says how that film was graded, and then JVC are using an algorithm that they built in to do their tone mapping, and it sets the projector up to how JVC think that metadata should be seen. The clip they used was Blade Runner 2049, and I've got to say, that's the best I've seen it look on any HDR projector.
Yeah,
and the difference between it on and off was quite staggering, really. And I don't think that it was jury-rigged in any way whatsoever, because looking at picture tone settings and so on that you get within the menu, the roundabout where I have it set on my X7900. So I don't think it was jury-rigged in any way. It's just, it was really well thought out technology, and it did make a really big difference to the viewing.
It did. It made a massive difference, and it's a clever idea. Because, like you say, Phil, projectors, HDR isn't they're not ideal for HDR because of the nature of the way projection works. And I think their approach of customizing the projector for the metadata for each film individually makes perfect sense, and it will hopefully avoid situations like something like Arrival, which I found unwatchable on a projector in HDR because it was just too dark. Now, I know people say, oh, well, you can get custom curves and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, but no one's going to do that. Right? We need something that works out of the box for your average punter. No one's going to start fiddling around and downloading stuff off online, this kind of stuff to improve the HDR performance. A projector should be able to do it out of the box. And if it can't, then it can't. But don't say it can if it can't. So this for me looked like a great idea. And I personally think that the demo they showed us, Blade Runner 2049 and then a sequence from The Greatest Showman. And I think they were the two of the best HDR projected demos I've ever seen. Simple as that. I was gobsmacked.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Top marks to James Lee. Well done.
Yeah.
And I was coming directly from a demo of the 870, which is 25 grand. So when you say the NX9, the 9 NX9 is expensive at 18.5 grand, it ain't compared to 25 grand. And in my opinion, it was better.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not laser. I appreciate that, but it seemed to be you can always replace the bulb, and the bulb ain't going to cost another 7 grand, is it?
Yeah. So, and when you think of the actual use case of a projector, I mean, like I say, I've got a cinema room. I'm very, very lucky to have a dedicated room, as are you, Steve. But the actual hours of use that room gets on a weekly and a yearly basis, the bulb in that projector is going to last the life of the projector.
Yeah.
I don't watch it. I don't leave it running. It gets a half an hour warm up. I watch a 2.5 hour film, and it gets shut down again. So when you're thinking about it from that point of view, the bulb is going to last the lifetime, the probable lifetime of the projector. And if you're like me and Steve, you're going to change your projectors every 3 or 4 years
before you change the bulb.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, laser has its advantages, especially when it comes to color purity. Especially when it comes to doing very clever things that the 870 does do, which is with the iris control that it has and the laser control that it has, where it's almost doing a local dimming type thing. It's really quite impressive when it does that. So it does have its advantages. But yeah, when you're talking about what you're talking about there, 7 grand difference, really. Mm-hmm. I'd have the JVC. I'd be with you, Steve. I'd have the JVC. Just, if I had 18.5 grand.
If I had 18.5 grand to spend, and sadly I don't. Yes, that would be it. But like I say, for everything I need from a projector, it looks as though the N7 is going to hit the target nicely in terms of overall performance, everything that you could possibly want. So, you have the option. You can go for 570 the Sony if you prefer. But from my perspective, the N7 ticks every box.
Yep.
I've currently got.
And don't panic, the X7900 is still around.
And it's a fantastic projector.
It is. It's brilliant. I love mine. I absolutely love it to bits. It's whatever the secret sauce is that JVC uses, it's still the most cinematic image out there, by far. Absolutely. And I'm really dead keen. I know the N7 is going to be the sweet spot. It's going to be the one that most people migrate to or certainly drawn to. But I'm really interested in seeing the N5. And what you actually get for your money there, and how it stacks up with projectors round about that price point as well, because it's directly up against the 270 from Sony. So it'd be interesting to see.
And it is a bit more expensive, but it has things like lens memory, which the 270 doesn't have.
Yeah, glass lens.
So all glass lens. Yes, so there's a lot of extra features on the N7. So that £1,000 difference in price, you can easily justify.
Yeah, I think so. Right, so that's projectors covered. I think we've almost covered everything that was the majority of what we've seen. Now let's go to the I don't want to be disrespectful and call them the fringe companies, but the up-and-coming companies when it comes to TV. And we're basically talking about Chinese manufacturers here. So TCL are finally coming to the UK. They are finally launching 3 models online to start with. They will be in the shops hopefully by the end of the year. They are still in negotiation with retailers and buyers to get them into the stores. But they realise they have to come to the UK. The UK is the second biggest TV market in Europe. So what were they like? They were good for the price point, is what I'll say in terms of what I've seen. In terms of build quality, I thought it was very much like Hisense, and I think Hisense do for the money they do a fantastic TV in terms of not just very good image quality, but also build quality, especially when you're looking at other manufacturers in the market where you're getting plastic chassis and plastic surrounds and lots of plastics being used. There's actually aluminium being used here. they've taken some time. They've taken some time with the design. Harman are providing the audio, so I believe it's going to be sold under the JBL banner in the UK for the soundbar, which is built into their higher end model. So they've got 3 models coming in. P628, 55, 50, 49 and 43. So it's the entry level TV under £500. The P648, which is a little bit more expensive, 65, 55, 50 and 43. And then their main TV for the year is the C748 or the C7 series, which is coming to the UK with the soundbar underneath the TV. There is another C7 which is for Europe, which has the soundbar as part of the stand. So along the mountain surface, you'd have the soundbar. But this is a soundbar under the screen. Like I say, it's a Harman Cardin or JBL branded. So in terms of design and that kind of thing, it looks the part basically at that price point that they're coming in at. It looks like they'll compete with Hisense. And basically what they want to do is they want to offer something that's high quality but low cost, and which is what we expect from a Chinese brand coming into a new market. But the interesting thing for me was speaking to Marek. I didn't get an opportunity to put the whole interview into the video because the video would have been an hour long, and I just wanted to get the highlights in there. But he did mention that their P series in the States and the R series in the States, which are more enthusiast based, they're going to bring them in next year into the UK. So we'll finally get the same TVs that the US sites are all reviewing at the minute and people are talking about that we don't get. So that looks promising, and it looks good that they're thinking about the UK in that way as well. They're not subjecting us to Android either. They said that the European TVs do Android, but we're not giving it to the UK. The UK gets Freeview Play, so there's no Android on there. Yeah, it looks like they're testing the market at the minute. They're seeing what the response is, and then they'll look over the next 3 years to bring in the big products. And they had an 8K panel on their stand. What surprised me is that they're number 3 in the world, which I was staggered at. I didn't realize.
In terms of sales?
In terms of they are the 3rd biggest TV company in the world.
So was it?
Which I just
Samsung, Hisense, them was it, or Hisense LG them?
I forgot to ask who number 1 and number 2 was. I just assumed that number 1 would be Samsung. But the thing is that everything is their own. So they don't buy panels in, or they manufacture everything. They're one of the major companies behind QLED, behind quantum dot technology. They are very much working the same way as Samsung and Hisense in that regard with QLED stuff. They have no interest in OLED. They certainly for the European market anyway, it's not something that they're manufacturing. So from them, yeah, definitely QLED. And they were talking about self-emissive pixels level QLED within 3 to 5 years.
So micro LED.
So basically micro LED. Yeah, that's what you're talking about. And they're huge. They're a massive company. Whether we've heard of them or not in the UK, they are. They're going to be the next big Samsung type global company. That's the way you see them going. The same ambitions that Hisense obviously have as well. Unfortunately, I didn't get across the Hisense, but you did. So
I did. Yes. To be honest, there was nothing massively new on the actual floor. They had a couple of models that are coming later in the year. They had their existing lineup, which is already out. They didn't have. You remember at CES they were dropping some heavy hints they were going to have an OLED.
Yeah.
They had the OLED behind the scenes, but didn't actually have it on the stand. But they said that the reason they weren't showing it on the stand because they weren't entirely happy with it yet. But they still look like they were planning to get it out before the end of this year. So that'll be interesting to see where they price their OLED compared to, say, Toshiba and Philips, who have also got OLEDs. And obviously Toshiba's already got OLED. Philips has already got OLEDs out. Toshiba have got some coming, so they're going to see where they price theirs. But that looked interesting. They've got a lower price point model just coming out, or just come out, called the A6200, and they're planning a version of that for Black Friday. It's going to be crazy cheap, and if it's as good as the A6200 I've seen, that could be an absolutely staggering deal. But they say they'll make a set number, and then once they've sold them, that'll be it. So it's just going to literally be for that weekend, over Black Friday and into the following week, and then once they've sold them all, that's it. But that's what they've got planned up. But yeah, I mean, they're a company that's absolutely enormous, and they've been really, I think, really delivering quality products in terms of, you say, solid build quality, good out of the box performance, and really attractive pricing. So I think we're going to see a lot more out of Hisense over the next couple of years.
I'm broken. Physically and mentally, I am so tired. It takes a hell of a lot out of you doing these shows. I've got to say, it's enjoyable though. That's the weird thing. It's like you put yourself through this and you think, never again, never again. But it's one of them shows that you know, even though there's nothing major ever gets announced, because it's always CES. CES is the main thing for everybody for their roadmaps and so on. It's still an interesting show. And the thing is that flights over to Berlin are pretty cheap. So if you fancy it and you want to go across, I would recommend, if you are an AV fan, if you're an enthusiast, it's your only opportunity really to get to see these products. That yes, we get to see them at CES at the beginning of the year, but this is now your opportunity to get out there and see the products, unless they disappear off the stands like the 8-inch OLED. But it's your opportunity, and like you say, there's cheap flights in there. It runs for 5 days. It used to be 2 weeks. It used to run for 2 weeks.
God.
But yes, it runs for 5 days these days, and it's well worth a trip. So if you fancy it, get a couple of yous together off the forums and go across, have a look at it. It's well worth doing. Just be prepared to do 20,000 steps a day, especially if you're like me and you don't think about planning your interviews and you're at one end for one time and then you've got to walk all the way to the next end of the messy and then walk all the way back to where you've been an hour earlier. It's a big show. It's a big show. But unlike CES, you can go if you're a member of the public and not in the trade. So, like I say, cheap flights, get yourself over there, have a look. And it's always well attended. It's always busy. Public days are a nightmare if you're trying to film. But I think it's been an enjoyable show, Steve.
It has been. And also, it's almost entirely in English, despite being in Berlin. So don't worry about the language factor. Everyone speaks English. The demonstrations are done in English. It's all in English. It's a great show. I mean, and as you say, Phil, for AV fans, it's pretty much the only opportunity you're going to get to see this stuff being demonstrated for you, because things like the Bristol show is mostly hi-fi, Munich's just hi-fi. So really, for an AV fan who's not in the business, this is your best bet. So check it out. And also, Berlin's a fantastic city as well. So you can have a nice weekend in Berlin and see some AV kit at the same time. Yeah. I'd strongly recommend it. It was a good show. It was a fun show, actually. There was some interesting stuff. I mean, as a Projector fan, it was a good show for that. But there was some interesting stuff on the TV side too. And it was a good chance to catch up with everybody.
Yeah, like you say with the Projectors, it's nice to see them ahead of CEDIA, because normally it's the CEDIA show, and then we don't get to see them till CES, and by that point it's been a few months and so on. So it's been good this time around to get that. So that's it for the show. That's it for the podcast. No movie stuff this week. We just wanted to cover IFA, get out of the way, and tell you everything that we've seen and our impressions and our thoughts. If you've got any questions, put them in the thread underneath this podcast on the forums, or stick a comment on the YouTube video on YouTube as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell for the notifications as well for when the next podcast is launched and published. And you can do the same as well with iTunes and so on. Make sure your subscriptions are up to date, and they should auto-publish. And apologies that we're a little bit late this Monday coming to you, but we wanted to get it when it's still fresh in the mind. And don't forget, we're back again next week with the regular crew. We'll be doing our updates for the last month as well, our favourites, TV shows and movies and all that kind of thing. So we'll be back to normal next week. But thanks for listening. My thanks to Steve Withers.
Thank you very much.
And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course, give us that 5-star rating on iTunes. You know you want to, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.